to C4. I'm Rick Seaman, and this is part 2 on our discussions on Agent Orange. I'd like to welcome my guests back, Dave Culmer, Shad Meshad, Judith Coburn, and Tad Foster. Agent Orange, Dioxin, disaster. When you read the names on the wall, you won't read the names of those who have fallen to this silent killer.
In Quang Tri, just in the area of I-Corps, less than I-Corps, in the area, 311,000 gallons was sprayed. And that's just the spray emissions. That doesn't include the dioxin or Agent Orange that was hand sprayed around military perimeters. I met a guy in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, who his hands were just almost unrecognizable, and I asked him rather naively, "What happened to your hands?" It was in and he said that he spent his whole tour in Vietnam with a weed killer can, and that's what I did a cartoon on it called "Weed Killer: The Body Count Continues." And I said "Cold Cock" by Agent Orange and Uncle Sam, because that's what he did his whole tour, was spray weed killer around the perimeter, and they told him it's not going to hurt you.
Right. And you saw his hands.
I saw his hands.
Shad, let's drive down the street you work on a little bit with the psychological aspects of something like this. What about the guy who is a NCO or an officer, who was a guy that loaded the planes or flew the planes or sat behind a desk and put in the order for, let's get another 155-gallon drums ready? Now here he sits and he knows he's responsible indirectly for the chemical poisoning of his own brothers. I mean, how many of those folks are out there as veterans today? And when I say poisoning his brothers, unbeknownst to him, because our military leaders were saying, "Oh, this just kills the enemy's foliage. This doesn't hurt us." I mean, that was the belief when we were dumping it, right?
Like I said, I flew through it every week, just trailing in a helicopter. I mean, I probably sucked as much Agent Orange as you did on the ground.
Yeah.
I mean, it hadn't hit the ground. We just flew through it till we got where we were going. I think, so many things, I think, and as we revisit this, once again, we are so ignorant. We're just trying to stay alive in Vietnam. Everybody has their different jobs, whether you're Marines, Air Force, or whatever. You just take for granted, just like every time you open up a jar of mayonnaise or whatever, that it's not poison in it. We don't have time. We don't expect our bullets to blow up in our weapons, or the shells to blow up in the cannons, or the booby traps to blow up in the case before we even put them on to go to the field. They're just certain things that we blindly accept, blind faith. And that's how you are. You come back and later you find out that which you were dropping or whatever. It depends on the individual, the consciousness of that individual. I've met several pilots from the Vietnam War, that are now way into their middle age, that are now become spiritually and religiously connected after 30 or 40 years. And now they're starting to feel some guilt or some remorse, or what can I do? And they come to either write a check to my foundation or whatever, some way of giving alms, of somehow freeing up the pain, the reality of whatever they did, either by ignorance or by knowledge. And there's just as many opinions about us as our individuals. And as I said, most veterans, my feeling in 36 years in this business is, you're just not going to get anywhere. You're going to choose a path to try to move on with your life until, if it's a disease, mentally or physically, it catches you and crushes you. And usually it's a family member, a wife, a significant other that tries to help you get help and goes up against the system we've been talking about.
Take a quick break. Thank you for watching C4. We are back. What have we learned here? Agent Orange in Vietnam, lots of it. It was in the air, it was on the ground, it was in the trees, it was in the water, and it was in the wind. Dangerous levels in the human body measured in parts per trillion. It settles in your fatty tissues. It doesn't pass through. You don't take a pill to flush it out. It stays there. Does it cause cancer and other serious illnesses? Yes.
With regard to the effects, there are veterans I know who has no symptoms outward symptoms whatsoever of Agent Orange. But the veteran had 3 children after he came back from Vietnam that had birth defects, and children prior to Vietnam, which were perfectly healthy. But he himself had no outward signs of anything, any problems as a result of Agent Orange.
I met a gentleman last year who has recently retired after 34 years of service with the VA. His name is Donald Rosenblum. He was deeply and heavily involved with Agent Orange, particularly the last 26 years of his service there with the VA. And in speaking to him, I felt like I was speaking to someone who had worked really hard there and who really cared. We've got our vet cam in his home right now in Silver Spring, Maryland. So let's bring him into the discussion. Donald, how's it going back there today?
I'm very well, thank you.
Thanks for being on C-4.
Thanks for having me.
Donald, you had already been at the VA for a number of years when the Agent Orange issue came to surface. What was it like there? What exactly was going on at that time?
I think there were some complaints that cancer may have been related to exposure. There were also skin problems and other health problems that veterans were experiencing, and they came to the VA starting in the middle to late 70s with complaints, medical complaints.
Donald, what department were you with VA Central Office during your 26 years with the Agent Orange Project?
Yes, I work for the Veterans Health Administration, which is the largest element of the Veterans Department of Veterans Affairs.
What was it like in those early days when the veterans were really coming at the VA about this whole question of Agent Orange and all the questions around it?
Well, I think they underestimated the magnitude of the problem. We had people that were dismissing it as just a fad. There were when I first joined the office in 1980, I had to sign a document saying that I understood the job was only good for 1 year. So they were not planning on a long-term effort to deal with this problem.
Donald, this is Tad Foster. So what you're indicating here is that the problem not only didn't go away, it got much larger in scope.
Yes, as I said, I signed a document saying that I understood the program was only good for 1 year, and I ended up working there for 26 years. And the program is still going on.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenblum. Stand by back there in Maryland. We're going to take a short break. This is C4. We'll be right back. We are back. Dave, Shad, Judith, Tad Foster. In the years that followed the Vietnam War, there were various public laws that mandated tests and research into the Agent Orange / Dioxin debacle. This was a result of pressure from veterans and a rising number of medical complaints. What followed were inconsistent testing efforts, informational jockeying and cover-ups by chemical companies, as well as our own Department of Defense, and even occasional jiving and jackassing from our own executive branch of our own administrations. The Vietnam veterans of that time were trying to get help, and all they were getting was the big runaround. Let's face it, our government knew this thing could rise to huge monetary heights, and they were shaking in their boots. Not to mention, most politicians of that era were working hard to win the hearts and minds by encouraging America to look away from the war that we had just walked away from and look into the future. But the vets were left behind. And as that decade of dismissal and denial continued, the vets were forced to come up with proof of the areas where they served, where the spraying occurred, when the spraying occurred. They had to mobilize to find maps that could give them this information of what occurred in the period of time between 1962 and 1975. When I spoke to Mr. Rosenblum several months ago, he made me aware of these books that were put out by the Institute of Medicine. The first one came out in 1994. That's this volume here. They're titled Veterans and Agent Orange: Health Effects of Herbicides Used in Vietnam. I've got two of them here. The first edition is from '94, and then there's the most recent edition that I got. It's from 2004. They've come out every 2 years since '94. I've read them, and I would recommend that every veteran with Agent Orange concerns or questions should do the same. There's DOD information, public law information, and probably one of the most truthful sources of information on Agent Orange that you can find. You can go to Amazon.com. All volumes can be ordered on Amazon.com. Mr. Rosenblum recommended that for veterans, the best two, if you just want to get two, would be the first one. Again, that's this one, the 1994 edition, and also the most recent, which currently is 2004. There should be another one coming out soon. The first edition contains maps of flight paths of spraying missions in 66, 67, 68, and 69. What I've done is made enlargements of the four maps from the book, and let's put them up here so we can see them. This first map is from 1966, and the spray missions are marked with black lines that you see all over the map of Vietnam here. When you see these real dark areas, like up at the DMZ and here in the Fish Hook, those are where flight paths were overlapped because it was repeated flights on those same areas during the course of that year. Here's, with this 1967 map, they did something a little bit different. They not only have the black lines and the black heavy areas where there was spraying, but they shaded the heavily populated areas. Particularly, you'll see that here in the Mekong Delta. It can be a little confusing when you first look at it. But this is 67. A lot of spraying along the coastal areas. Pretty heavy in 2 Corps, heavy up along the DMZ. Here again in 3 Corps, the Fish Hook, and this area north of Saigon. You're probably looking at War Zone D and C there. Let's go to 68. There's 1968. And, of course, 1969. it's good to know if you were there. And Tad Foster has brought with him some amazing maps that were once the property of the United States Air Force. We'll take a look at them on our next Agent Orange discussion, and you can go there by clicking on Part 3. I will also show you some charts that show the gallonage of Agent Orange and other chemical agents that were sprayed during those years on particular U.S. bases and AOs. So we'll see you on our next discussion of Agent Orange, Part 3. Rick Seaman for C4. Out.